All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you two panelists this morning with the session Even Little Can Code, coding for K through 2 with Tynker. All right, David Lockhart is a little bit of everything. He's a teacher, coach, presenter, maker, and a whole host of other things that have one goal in mind, making the class interesting. He did it in his own classroom by bringing a historical news concept to high school social studies. He did it as a coach and a maker with the KSU I Teach team, and now he does it with coding as a member of the team at Tynker. Classrooms need a change, and David's mission is to bring it. Linda Kurtz began teaching at the first STEM certified school in Georgia and continuously pushed the faculty of STEM and technology education in the interest of always doing what is best for students. She's been a featured teacher for Engineering is Elementary, a fellow in the Phil Mickelson Exxon Mobil Math and Science Academy, and a NOAA teacher at sea. Linda is the founder of STEM Educational Consulting Incorporated, the proud mother of 3 semi-adult college students, and an advocate for children with autism in her spare time. Linda is currently a STEM specialist at Sope Elementary. Welcome, and I will pin the form for thanks to the chat, and I will exit the screen now and monitor the chat.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I got to make sure I share the right screen, so hopefully this will work out the way I want it to. We can see the slide deck? Yes, no?
Yes.
All right, cool. So this is Even Littles Can Code. This is coding for K through 2. So this is kind of going to those very, very young students and how we let those students go and learn how to code. And like Yolanda said, my name is David Lockhart. I'm the educator support coach at Tynker. Basically what that means is that I'm the person that supports teachers. And one of our teachers that I have the joy of working with, because her school is like 10 minutes from my house, is Miss Kurtz. And Miss Kurtz, do you want to say hey real quick?
Hey everybody, pleasure to be here, and I like to think that you like working with me, and it's not just geography.
It is awesome to work with you. It's the nice thing is I actually live up in Northeast. Hey, Miss Kurtz, I'm getting a little feedback on my end. Can you mute until I pass off to you? Awesome. But I do love working with you. It is not just geography. It's awesome that I actually live up in, and that's part of it too, is I actually live in the Atlanta area. Even though I work for a company that's based out of California, but I was a teacher in the Atlanta area. I was a teacher in Cobb County and in APS, and then I worked for KSU I Teach. And then what's nice too is that Miss Kurtz, I do love working with her because she gives me the opportunity to still be a teacher. Even though I didn't make it out this year because of kind of coronacation, I get to go and kind of work with her kids at her school. But kind of our agenda today is we're going to talk about what is Tynker. I'm going to walk you through kind of Tynker's course progression so you can kind of see this as a whole. And then Ms. Kurtz is going to show you, Linda's going to show you the kind of what Tynker Junior and what this icon-based coding looks like for K through 2. I'll also, as we kind of work through, I'll show you some of the other options we have for K through 2. And then towards the end, we'll talk about how to get connected, how to stay getting support, and all of those types of things that you may need as you kind of work through this. But really, when we start, we talk about what is Tynker. And really, we like to think of Tynker as kind of the easiest way to teach computer science in schools, because we want this to be kind of an all-encompassing platform and a platform that kind of goes to creativity, that kids can go in any class and be what code is meant to be and be creative with code. And so when you look at it, it kind of goes through 2 main modalities, 2 main tracks. The first one is those great creative coding tools. And the idea is that kids can build all the way from that icon base that we'll talk a lot about today and show you today, that icon-based coding in kindergarten and even pre-kindergarten, and can kind of move up to kind of build on their skills where they transition eventually into writing in Python and JavaScript and HTML. And it's a comprehensive curriculum. You literally can start kids as young as 2 or 3 years old. I have a daughter. What we'll show you today is something that I have a daughter who is very young. She's 3 years old, and she can actually work with this app. So you can really start them that young, but then you can progress and progress and progress and eventually get them to a point where they're writing JavaScript and Python. And then I think another key kind of principle here is, can you get creative with core classrooms? I think especially at the elementary level, Soap Creek is so lucky to have Miss Kurtz as a STEM teacher, but a lot of elementary schools don't. That kind of coding and computer science is something that you're going to have to kind of implement in core classes. And so Tynker has these STEM lessons that are these 200 PBL lessons that you can go in and you can actually have kids create with code in science, in social studies, in math, and ELA. And really, if you want to see more of that, we won't really do a lot of that in this session. I can obviously, during the time, can kind of pull some time and show you what that looks like if that's a question. But we are doing a session it's the 1 o'clock-ish session where we're doing a session for 3 through 5, and we'll actually walk through a STEM lesson there. And then the other key here, and this works even with K through 2, is that we want to make this as easy as possible on teachers. And so there's lots of data here. You can see where your kids are. It's a classroom management system. So if you've ever used anything like Schoology or Canvas or Google Classroom or any of those types of things, you can actually go and create classes in that realm and in kind of that same kind of format. So it's very familiar. And then from a young kid's standpoint, so from like a kindergarten standpoint, logging in is always super hard. We'll show you there's a really easy way to do that now. And professional development, we have lots of professional development. I'll talk more about that towards the end. And really the whole key here is we want to empower kids to be makers. We want to empower kids to that creativity side of coding. And again, it's that, can you go and have kids create things like games and animations and simulations and stories in both block and text? But then there's also other pieces here. There's an augmented reality and a Minecraft piece that kids can go in and they can create Pokemon Go style games. They can code in Minecraft. There's a hardware piece with Microbit. And really for a K through 2, it's a little hard because there's some reading skills involved. But I think if a lot of you probably teach 3rd through 5th as well. And it's a great tool that even a 3rd grader can get on and can actually start coding in. And then there's connections to robotics and drones, spheros, parrot drones, all of those types of things. And really the whole key here is that this is something that, especially I've seen it kind of firsthand, that as we've gone through this weird coronavirus time that we're in, that is gone where you see people all over the world using it. So there's a bigger community, and we'll talk about that bigger community a little bit more towards the end as well. But I think what you guys are here for is to kind of see that course progression. Where can kids go as they kind of progress through Tynker? And so really from a course progression standpoint, the idea is that with pre-readers, with K through 2, it's voice enabled, it's tappable. If you've ever seen a kid who's as young as like 2 years old on an iPhone, you know that those kids, it's kind of intuitive to those students. So they can go in and they can tap and move around in there. And so to have that kind of icon-based programming, that I think when you look at kind of coding as a whole, there's not that many tools out there that do that. And I think there's really some key points that kids can go and they can start to learn things like loops and conditionals as they kind of work through that, but it's picture-based. Reading skills are not getting in the way. And then we move kids into drag and drop text blocks, where if you've ever seen anything like Scratch or anything like that, it's not that, but it's very similar, where kids can go and they can build things out with code. They can convert those blocks to text, but then they can go and they can build things out with code without worrying about syntax. If you've ever seen kids that are as young as like 3rd grade write, they can't even put periods on the end of their own sentence a lot of the time. They're still learning that skill. And so worrying about syntax like colons and spacing and all that stuff is really not, it takes a while to get to that, but you can start learning things like loops and conditionals and patterns. And then in middle school, the idea is that they switch to those blocks. You can convert those over to Python and JavaScript and Swift. And so they can start coding in those languages without having to necessarily get the syntax just right just yet. And then obviously, as they move into high school, the idea is to kind of move into text. But from a pre-K through second grade standpoint, and Ms. Kurtz is going to show you this like really well here in just a few minutes. The idea is that these are word-free blocks, that kids, when you talk to like a second grade standpoint, reading skills are always the question mark. Can kids actually read effectively to kind of do some kind of digital program? And because a lot of kids are still learning that, and so the skills are all over the map. And so when you look at this pre-K through second grade, the idea is that it's word-free blocks, it's arrows, it's pictures. There's voiceover to help kids through it. There's helpful hints. And it's a tap-tap integration. I think when you look at kind of kids that young managing keyboards, it's not really a super effective kind of way for kids to interact with digital programming. But if you can do that kind of tap-tap integration, it is really, really effective. And so we'll show you kind of how this works in just a sec. And really, when you look at kind of how do kids get in, and I'll show you where this is in Tynker in just a sec before I kind of pass it off to Ms. Kurtz to let you build a project with her, is there's QR code sign-ins. I think when you look at kids this young, it's always a really tough thing to get kids to write logins and get kids to type logins. And so when you set up a class in Tynker, you can actually have kids, you get QR codes that the kids can scan. Now, I know this from a remote learning standpoint, getting those QR codes out to students is really hard. I'll talk about, as I kind of show you where this is, I'll talk about kind of some things we're working on there. But I always like to point out here too that my son is going into second grade. This is my son scanning the QR code. They use him in all the promotional stuff now. So let me share let's share this screen real quick. And let me kind of walk you through what's available for K through 2 before I pass off to Ms. Kurtz to where we build a project in Tynker Junior. And so when you look at kind of a K through 2 standpoint, so I'm in Tynker. So as a teacher, nothing's different on the teacher front for no matter if you have K through 2 or 3 through 5 or any of that stuff. But and there's all kinds of ways to build a class. I don't really want to dive deep into that just yet because there's kind of some ins and outs there. But like when I go and I build a class, it's going to create a class card. And all I have to do to get into that class is click on that class card. And really the reason I want to show you this is that you have a grade book where you can actually see all the progress that kids do. And so if you see there's icon coding over here, so everything that you can do in Tynker Junior is going to be there. But the other key here is that Students tab, you also have that QR code, this Tynker Smart Pass. So all this student has to do to log in is print that Smart Pass off and to the icon base, they scan it, and then they're done. That's all they have to do to actually get into the program. And then from a K through 2 content standpoint, there's really a couple pieces of content here. And after we kind of show you what Junior looks like and kind of have you build a project with us, we'll show you kind of some other places where you can get a lot of free content. But kind of what our idea around K through 2 is that we want to go in and have that Tynker Junior iPad app. And Ms. Kurtz is going to show you that deep. So we'll wait kind of to show you the ins and outs of that in just a second. And the idea here is that we have the kind of K through 2 icon-based coding on the iPad. Think about it for a second. It's all about that touchable screen that kids can go and tap. It's that tap-tap integration. That's why it's on iPad. Will it come to other devices eventually? Possibly. I would hope so, but it's a little more difficult. And you see a lot of K through 2 in schools. I know Metro Atlanta districts that the schools decided that they wanted to go for a different device for that elementary school, but then they kind of came back and they said K through 2 is still going to be iPad. So you see kind of that iPad integration with those young grades because of that touchable, tappable screen. And so this is a whole app called Tynker Junior that has 5 courses. It has maker projects you're going to see. There's lots of content here for kids that age. And my own child, who's 3 years old, can do this app. She can maneuver around in this app. And then the other piece with content-wise is that there are a couple of courses that are puzzle-based courses. So Space Cadet Dragon Spells Programming 1A and 1B. And there's puzzle-based courses that you can go in and they have voiceover to help the kids through it. It's still going to have word-based blocks, but there's no workshop that's got kind of heavy reading. But there's voiceover to help kids through it. And if you're doing iPad already, Space Cadet and Dragon Spells are on the Red Tynker app. They're a different app, but they actually are free on iPad too. So really from a K-2 content standpoint, there's lots of content here. And I'll show you a couple other places kind of after we look at Junior to see that K-2 content. So that's kind of what it looks like from a high level standpoint. I'm going to pass off to Ms. Kurtz now and let her kind of show you, yes, Smart Pass is great. And I'll pass off to Ms. Kurtz now. I'll mute myself and let you kind of share your screen. Let me unshare mine. And we'll go from there. And you can kind of lead people through a maker project. So really, and kind of how, I think it's also kind of good to touch on kind of how to get there as far as Tynker Junior and how to log in. Cool? All right, I'm ready for you, or do you need to unmute? There you go.
All right, can you see me okay? All right. Hey, everybody. And David, I love it when you come to work with us too. And what I like about what you bring to the classroom, other than just the wealth of knowledge when it comes to Tynker and coding, it's you really foster that sense of community when it comes to coding. And I think a common misconception among teachers who are new to teaching coding is that it's a singular sport, like kids sit alone with a device and nobody talks with their face in a screen. And that's really not at all what it's like. David really does a good job about fostering the community of coding. A couple other things that Tynker Junior especially, I feel like helps us overcome. A lot of kids, when they come into school, K-2, they look at the device as a tool for, it's a toy. You know, it gets passed to the back seat, leave mama alone, you know, entertain yourself. But we actually try to transition that iPads are a tool for creation. It's not a toy. If something gets frustrating or you spend a couple of minutes, you hop from next to the next. And we're changing that, and we're building on the skills and actually building skills within Tynker Junior that they can take to from tap coding to the block coding, and then from the block coding into the text coding. So I'm putting my iPad behind me so you guys can kind of see where I am. From the Tynker Junior app, all of these options pop up. Got to catch you tuned too. And you have all of these games behind me. You can log in. I've already logged in, but you can log in with a Smart Pass or with a username and password. So I put my students in the Tynker web-based version, and then they can log in either with Smart Pass, or my kids who are text friendly can tap. I'm telling you, the Smart Pass is the best thing that ever happened to K-2 for me. There's no tears when you have to scan a QR code, and I put their QR code right in their journal, so they open their journal, sign it, and they're working in seconds of entering my classroom. So I'm going to move down to, you have all of these activities, but I like the studio because we're moving from kids being a passive just player to a creator. And that's where Tynker Junior comes in for me. So arts is, I think by nature, you know, collaborative, and kids love art. So that's just a great place for me to start. So I'm going to hop into the art, but then I'm going to hop out and I'm going to show you guys the teacher guide. When you look at this on the surface, a lot of teachers, when they first started out, like, oh, the kids were done in 5 minutes. Well, if they're done in 5 minutes, they're really not going very deep. You can go so deep with these simple programs when the kids are creating. So I'm going to show you art real quick. And again, it's simple tapping. They don't have to drag or place. And this says, shoot.
To make a pattern, tap the block to add to your code.
So it takes you through the first activity and tells you which one.
Choose type.
Wild Tracks is all about creating shapes with your animals and directions. David's seen in my classroom, we have the kids up, walking around, learning right, left, up, down.
Tap right block to add it to your code.
So at VoiceOver, it takes the kids step by step through the first project, and then they're often creating after their first one.
Choose a number of F's.
So something to point out real quick here. There's a question about it being the website. So Tynker Junior is actually its own app on iPad. There is an iPhone version as well. The idea, again, is that it's that touchable, tappable screen. So you definitely have to have an iOS device to run this at the moment. But something to kind of point out here, too, is that there's no dragging here. This is touch, like you can touch. And so kids that are that young, like the dragging you don't have to do, because I know like having the kid point his finger and like drag it around is always really hard. So that's definitely something that you'll see as you kind of go through it, that you don't really have to drag anything.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about Tynker Junior. I think the dragging and dropping so that kids develop, but they don't come into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, always having that skill of drag and drop. So this taps and it pops the code right where it should be. So we're going to go through the first one, then I'm going to jump back to the teacher guide and we're going to come back. So next, first
play to see the pattern.
Very simple first program. And when you tap, it tells you to tap play. And that's the very first step. Now that
I'll try making own pattern.
And we're going to progress from a very beginner step from here to intermediate and advanced, where kids are actually creating their own shapes, multiple shapes, and starting loops at the very beginning of, coding with Tynker Junior, which I love. So I'm going to back arrow. If you can see up there, the back arrow.
Wild cracks.
I'm going to back again. And I'm going to go to the settings button. If you can see it up there, same place. So this kind of keeps kids out of the teacher guide, having to answer a simple question. But here you have answer keys for those beginning programs. And then for the studio that I love, there's teacher guides for all of these. So I download the teacher guides and go through them first. And sometimes I incorporate them into my examples. Sometimes I just use the challenges of the words. Can you make a square? Hey, can you make 2 squares? So I'm going to show you after I download it and I go back into Safari. It's hard to see on my screen. I apologize, but there's a little download button right there. And I hop into my downloads and I have Art Studio. So I'm not going to go through all the screens, but I just want to show you parts that I think are important that help me as a teacher guide the students. And this is where I did not come into this as a computer science expert at all. Now, people like David have helped me along, but the guides help me and also help me connect to the curriculum that the kids were learning already. So I'm not just teaching computer science strictly for computer science sake, but I'm also incorporating things that the kids are already learning, kindergarten, first grade shapes, for example. So Art Studio that we just started, you saw Wild Tracks, which was the very beginning. And then for the beginner level, you're going to challenge students to make a zigzag that goes up into the left. And then you're going to make a zigzag, go down into the right. This is the very basic stuff. You saw it first. We just took those first couple steps. Then we're going to build it and keep going. The nice thing about this is it gives you the example of the code that you have to do to make that zigzag pattern. And so for every challenge, it does give you a sample code. So either you can share with students or you can just use it to guide them. I like having the answers, so I'm not trying to answer 18 separate questions. And also, if you see a child gets this very quickly, you can move them on to the intermediate steps. So I like that the teacher guide helps you advance students, work with other students who need more help, and then it helps you pair students, the kids who are ready to move on to intermediate and advanced steps. You just move them on, like, hey, you guys go over there and work together. Why don't you try doing multiple squares and see if you can add an angle? There's so many things you can do. And I like the teacher guide because it kind of helps me know how to progress the kids, and I don't have to plan it or come up with the ideas myself. I can pick what matches the kids' skill level or what they're learning at the time. So I'm going to move to an intermediate just to show you an example on the teacher guide, and then we can hop back in. So this is what I mean about it seems simple, but there's really deep computer science concepts built in, and the kids are just making the cute little critters walk around and show patterns. So for the intermediate step, you would create a pattern that is 6 steps wide, and then create a square-shaped spiral pattern. So I'm going to move on. This is where the kids get very quickly in their first lesson. They move from steps to making squares. Multiple squares. And then my students, we go on later and we have them build like the first letter of their name. So they really enjoy doing that. And an example of the advanced activities is using exactly 9 blocks, make your animal go on a path and come back exactly where they started. It's a tough task. Like, it took me a minute with the kids to figure it out. Try switching animal tracks midway through the journey. So I think about my kindergarten babies, they learn, and first grade babies, they learn all about animals and shapes. And this is a great way to integrate computer science and what they're already learning. So this is what an advanced program looks like. And this is just the first step. This is just the first part of the art studio. And there's 4 lessons that we'll progress through. So I'm going to hop back into Tynker Junior. Please shout out any questions or comments. We'd love to hear back from people. I do this so much. I hope I'm not skipping a step. So I'm going to hop back into Tynker Junior and show you an art studio.
Wild track.
Now, we saw wild tracks and how deep you can go. I'm going to show you. Actually copied one of my students. We were doing this online and made the letter G, was very proud and had to share with me. So here's the code for the letter G. So I really like that the kids have taken this and kept going, even though we're not physically in front of each other. They're still working, they're still progressing, they still have their smart pass, they can log in easily on any device, and it saves their work. I can also go in as a teacher and see what they've done and how far they've gone. So clearly I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to progress him to the advanced and then move him on to the next level and encourage him to keep going. So
Wild track.
in each of the Tynker lessons, this is just Art Studio, and you can see at the top there's 4 circles that have 4 different lesson types, and they each progress. So the first one, the wild tracks, was just shapes, creating shapes repeatedly. And then if we go to Seabed Scribbler, and if you tap on the screen, it will again take you through the first lesson. So I'm going to take you through that very quickly.
Say happy to Tracy the turtle. Tracy, draw while she moves and turns. Use these code blocks to help her draw. Tap the repeat block to add it to code.
So again, I'm just tapping and it's popping right where it should go.
How many times you want Tracy to turn.
It's leading me through the first lesson step by step.
Turn block, turn Tracy to the left. Choose when to turn. The move block, move Tracy forward. Select how far you want her to move. Tap play to see Tracy draw. Wow, nice work. Now make more with Tracy.
Right. What I love about that is in a very simple fashion, we went very quickly from just walking a couple steps and making simple turns to we've just introduced angles and loops to little kids, and it's a very friendly way. So going from here, we're going to move forward through loops in the beginner stage, and then we're going to do nested loops, loops within loops with Seabed Scribbler, and that's just the second part of Art Studio. So if you're getting an iPad Kurtz, we have ours set for automatic updates, but we do go through and we just do every few weeks. To answer your question, April, we do a couple quick updates on the apps. Like if I know I'm using for the next 2 weeks, I'll check. But that hasn't been a problem for us. And we have 60 iPads shared between a partner and I. And we also share those iPads with the grade level teachers. So I might introduce a lesson and send it back for them to continue and move on. So loops within loops. I'm going to show you, I'm going to hop back into that teacher guide to show you what those loops within loops look like. So I don't spend time, tapping and tapping over and over again. I'm going to hop back into the teacher guide. And I obviously use the teacher guide a lot. So you see, I went from the first wild tracks, keep scrolling down, and they're all in order, to Seabed Scribbler. And then from the beginners, Can you draw a square? Can you draw a triangle? And again, if you can see behind me, using the loops, angles, and steps forward. And David's seen my classroom where I have things taped out. I have angles taped out. I have angles on the wall. We have paper folded angles. I mean, and also the steps, left, right, forward, back, to help the kids. That's something that they struggle with, like into third grade. And I feel like this really helps them, especially we'll be walking around with our iPads acting out the whole thing. Oh, this is a hexagon. So from beginner, there's your code for triangle. 3 repeats, and then to make a square, all they have to do is change the 3 to a 4, change the angle to a right angle. And I like that the kids are doing these skills and learning angles and all these things before they actually know what it is they're learning, but it's there. They can do it, and I've seen it. I think what really sold me that I was doing the right thing computer science-wise with Tynker and choosing Tynker for years now, as my kids have gone through from little kids on to middle school and high school. I've had teachers, middle school and high school teachers, come back to me and come to my classroom and want to know what we're doing, because by the time the kids who have been through all of this from kindergarten through 5th grade, they're getting to middle school and high school, and they've tapped out. They know all the content that those teachers are ready to share with them on the first day. So that really told me that we were on to the right thing. So beginner steps, now we're in Seabed Scribbler, that second lesson embedded within Art Studio. When I get to the intermediate, where we're actually nesting loops, and this is such an advanced concept, and the kids are perfectly capable. So intermediate level says add more than one angle and movement command to your loop, and then see what she draws. So it's really exploring. You know, like that all the kids, there's not one correct. The kids have to let go of that. There's only one prescribed correct answer they're actually creating, and we're sharing with each other. And one thing David taught me was really emphasizing that collaborative step of there. Oh, what did you draw? How many angles was that? Oh, what angle did you choose? And the kids are not only creating with code, learning angles, learning shapes, but they're sharing and collaborating, which is a huge step. So in the intermediate step, it says experiment and create a cool pattern of your own. The kids could sit there and create their own patterns and share all day long. But I want to hop into the intermediate, where the kids are actually creating parallelograms and multiple parallelograms. And you can see in the intermediate step, and I apologize if it's blurry, but you have a 6 repeats and then a 2 repeat, and they're nested loops within each other. And that's, to me, a pretty advanced concept, but it's very accessible. It talks to the kids. If they have a question, they can hit the question mark and it'll give them hints or repeat instructions, and it talks to them. I use this a lot too with some of my non-readers and my special needs kiddos that come to me, that where the reading might be the challenge, but the higher order problem solving and thinking that, you know, computer science inspires, they're capable of that. So Tynker Jr. to me removes a lot of those obstacles for reading. So I'm going to hop back and show you one more thing, and then I'll kind of kick it back over to you, David, if you're ready. So you saw Seabed Scribbler. As far as you can go, I want to show you one more real quick.
Starfish spirals.
I love the spirograph and the spirographed art, and kids love starfish spirals. I'll show you a couple things in here, but I love that the first lesson, if you just tap the center of the screen, it will start the kid on their own first lesson, and they can go back and repeat that a couple of times if they need to. So it's not a rush to move on, it's a rush to create. And again, we've moved away from this is a tool of passively playing a game. It's a tool that we're using to create with code, and also embedding just tons of math skills in here.
Look, it's for the starfish. She loves draw. Stella uses code to create her art. Let's help her draw. First, tap on the ankle block to add it to your code. But choose how Stella will move when she draws. Next, the draw block. But choose the shape you want her to draw. Now, at play to see what Stella does.
So I like it only starts off with the first 2 steps. You start off with angles and draw, and then you get to choose the shape that you're going to draw.
Good job. Now help Stella draw more pictures.
Okay, so again, and David, you can let me know if you want me to go through again with the steps of beginner, intermediate, and advanced. But this is one of the kids' particular favorites, and they begin to recognize those angles. We do a lot of searches in the room looking at the shape button, looking for shapes in the room, outside the room, trying to match the shapes with things in real life, kind of building up those math skills. David, are you ready to jump in?
Sure, jump in some. We're ready. Yeah.
I'm happy to go through one more time, intermediate and advanced, but I know how into it I am. I just don't know what you need to cover.
So I think let's do this. Let me answer a couple of questions and a couple of kind of points here and there. And then let's give them time to kind of play a little bit. And then we can kind of answer questions as they come up. Because and remember too, if you don't have an iPad, if you don't have an iPad just handy right away, this does work on iPhone as well. So you can jump in with iPhone. So let me jump in real quick. Let me flip over to my screen. And so I had this where I wanted it. Sorry, give me 1 second. And then once I did this, it went back to here. So one of the things, so what Linda's kind of shown you is she's shown you the kind of creative aspect of this. And so when you look at it, there's these creative studios that kids can go in and they can create their own content. So game studio, creating card, animation studio, music studio, art studio. And so you saw that she's like creating art there. And so think about what you're doing. You're giving kids as powerful as like kindergartners the ability to create with code here and the ability to do it. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and one of the ones that I think they're all great. One of the ones that I've seen my daughter do, who just turned 3, is she can actually go in there as a 3-year-old and she can do music studio and create her own music. And so she's creating code and learning those patterns. But what I also wanted to kind of point out too is that there's more than just that kind of creative studio in there. We wanted to give you the ability to kind of create a project with us. But you also have the ability to kind of do courses where kids go in and they learn that kind of steps through code, and it starts them off very small, and then they kind of move into where they're doing loops and conditionals. And there's 5 different courses here. So some of the ones that I like the most is Wild Rumble. Actually, kind of, I'm a former social studies teacher, so Wild Rumble speaks to my heart a little bit, because what it does is it actually teaches the kids a little geography as they go and a little bit about animals too. When we tested it with my son, because my son actually tested this platform, he liked Wild Rumble because you saw as the animal was doing the art, because they kind of, it's part of the Maker Studio too. He does the little dance at the end. He really liked that part. But what I also want to point out is that Linda's right, that you get pretty complex here as far as coding skills go. When you look at something like Super Squad, kids go as far as doing loops, conditionals, nested loops. They do coding multiple characters at the same time. And I really think, just being honest, you see that like there's coding out there for like 3rd through 5th where reading skills are a key. You see that a lot. There's K-2 space. There's not a lot there. And we did have some questions. I did want to point out the Red app too before we give you some kind of time to play. So really when you look at this kind of, I know it's a little bit confusing when you look at it from a standpoint of there's 2 apps here. There's the Tynker Junior app, and that's where that K-2 icon-based coding is. Then there's what I call the Tynker Red app or the Tynker app, and that's where all the rest of the content is, especially for elementary school. But the key here in that K-2 and that but what we would say is basically the 3rd through 5th app, is that you also have Space Cadet and Dragon spells. So if you're looking at K-2 and Tynker Junior, they're like flying through it, they can use Space Cadet and Dragon spells. Those have voiceover, and these 2 courses are also free. So you can definitely use those as well. And then there were some questions about iPads, and I saw April, and April, we've met each other many times. The iPads is always kind of, when you look at updates, is always a question with them. I will say this about these apps. These apps go back as far as iOS 10. And so really, if you can update to iOS 10, really the only things you miss in updates typically are either new content, that does happen, or there may be a bug fix or something like that. They still should be pretty usable. The other key with this app, and I always like to point this out too, is this app is a little bit more complex in that this app has both our school side and home side on it. What you're seeing is the Tynker for School side, and you see that logo up there in the middle. If I click the little home icon in the top, this is what it looks like, and that's our home side. All you have to do is click the little school building in the left side. So let's do this. I want to take a few minutes. I want to take a few minutes, and I want to give you some time to play. Now, here's a key point I want to make sure, too, is that Tynker Red app is iPad only. Tynker Junior is on both. So I want to give you some time to play, and then we'll show you some kind of other places that you can go and get K-2 content and give you some time to play there as well. So let's take about the next 3 or 4 minutes. I will stop talking, and you guys go in there, play with Tynker Junior, kind of see some of the content in there. When you look at it from a free perspective, because I know that's always the kind of a key, is that Ocean Odyssey, I think, is completely for free. And then you can kind of experience some of the others as well. And again, where this app speaks to me passionately and this kind of content speaks to me passionately is if I take myself out of Tynker. When I looked at it from, I used to work for KSU iTeach, and one of the things that we did is we were very into kind of the makerspace realm, where we would go in and we would do maker camps. I helped build the maker bus with Kennesaw State. And one of the things that was really lacking from a coding standpoint is can you get K-2 kids on it and do it? And I think this is definitely part of that. And what speaks to me too is that I've seen my own kids on this. Like I've said a couple of times, is that my 3-year-old can maneuver this app. But I also have a first grade son who's going into second grade. He bounces off every flipping wall in a room usually. And I've seen this kind of engage him in a different way. And I think that's what's really key here is that engagement for these kids is that you can really engage them really well.
And one thing I've noticed too is a lot of the kids who really take off and are super successful, and they're never the kids I expect. I would never have pegged the kids that are that just master this so fast and move on and progress. They were never the kids that really came up on my radar. Like they were fine, but it's always someone you don't expect, and to see them just charge forward and succeed on a level you never expected. That's what I love about what this brings out and what it shows me in the kids. So from my kid one of my kids who started out and was a struggling reader and very struggling child, he won science fair by using Tynker to create an app that he used to test for a project in science fair. So he created the app for his science fair project. And that's where it took me from someone who in first, second grade was a very struggling reader to winning science fair. That's all.
Well, I think that's a great point, because where my passion in this comes out is I'm not a natural coder. I'm still learning Python, but I see this as creativity. I see this as letting kids create in a classroom to show what they know. To me, that's what I needed in school. That's what I knocked my headphone out. That's what my kids and my classes needed. And what I see here is that I had kids that in my high school social studies classes that, I would go in and have them create these video projects. And what I came to find out is that there are kids that I literally can give a $100 bill to, and they're not going to put themselves on video. So if I can give them something to be creative where they can tell their own story, and they can do it, combining it with a future skill, that to me is money. And so that's why like coding and creation, even if you don't see it as like, even if Tynker's not your thing, that's where I see kind of the whole point of this. So let's do this. I'm going to stop talking for about 3 or 4 minutes. We'll probably give it about 4. You guys go in there and play. Throw questions in the chat. I can come back and answer those questions really quick. Or Linda, you can answer those as well. And then we can kind of go, and I'll show you a couple other places to play too, and so that you can go and see kind of content that you can use, especially that kind of free side content as well. So I'll pause my video, pause my audio for about 3 or 4 minutes, give you a chance to play, and then we'll come right back. Oh, I did forget to answer this question, so let me make sure I answer this. Keep playing if that's where you are, but I definitely want to answer this question as well. Let me share my screen. Asked about scope and sequence guides on the web-based platform. And so you definitely can get those teacher guides that Linda touched on the web-based platform. So when I'm in courses, Tynker Junior is something that you can assign. And so you assign that course, you build a class, assign that course, kids go in and they log in with their login in Tynker Junior. But if you hit preview on any lesson in Tynker and you hit lessons, you get and you notice that all these lessons have previews on them. So you're going to get those same scope and sequence guides. So like if I come down here to training mode, sure. I get a lesson plan, I get answer keys, I get all that stuff still in Tynker Junior as well. I meant to grab that question. I knew that question came up. All right, so let's give you a chance to kind of pull back for a second. And let me share my screen once more. I think it was actually already shared, but we'll share it again. And so one of the things that I want to definitely touch on as well is kind of what kind of other stuff is here for a K-2 that's free. What can you go and use? Can you go and look at? Can you go and play with? And give you a little bit of time to do that. And again, if there's questions, and especially once we kind of give you some time here, we'll kind of pull up and if there's questions, we can definitely have you jump on screen and kind of show us what you do as well. But really, when you look at kind of content-wise, so really, again, the way that Tynker kind of works is that you can build as many classes and with as many students as you want for free. There's no cost to any of that. Where it gets into kind of that premium mode is content, but there are a couple of courses that are free. So when you look at kind of from a K-2 standpoint, really the two free courses are Programming 100 and this Barbie You Can Be Anything course. And really Programming 100, so the key with this from a K-2 standpoint is I would go and click on preview here and I would click lessons. And I wouldn't necessarily assign everything to a K-2 student. Because when you look at something like Animated Card Creator, I think there's pieces in here you could use, especially with second graders. But Animated Card Creator gets into a workshop project, which is gets into a lot of reading. But if you look at something like Candy Quest and you click preview, those kids, if they've got a certain level of reading skill, they can probably do Candy Quest. because the idea here is you've got a little character, you're starting to learn those patterns, those sequencing, those loops and conditionals, and they can do kind of some of that simple reading skills here. So that's one option as far as free content goes. The other option as far as free content goes is the Barbie You Can Do Anything course. And now I think a lot of people kind of laugh or kind of roll. I know the reactions that Barbie sometimes gets, especially when you talk about doing it with boys. But when you look at this course has voiceover, so it can kind of help kids through that process. And what's really cool about this course is I think what we miss a lot, and the reason that you can connect this with so many coding with so many subject areas, is that coding can be storytelling. Coding can be, can I tell a story? Can I build an animation? And the Barbie course, you're using characters there. And it's a short course where kids can go in and they can start to build their own, they can start to learn how to build projects to really tell that story and make that connection to science or social studies or math. And I think as kids as young as second grade, especially, they could go in and build projects where they're like Abraham Lincoln saying hello. Like, you can make that happen if you kind of progress the right way. And then the other point here too is you also have this create project tab up here. Most of these are going to be a little bit hard for this level because most of these ask kids to get into a workshop, but those higher level second graders, they could go in and kind of start to build their own projects and build their own content. Now, the other piece that you can go is Tynker Hour of Code. If you go to tynker.com/hour of code, there is a lot of free content here. And we always advocate people sign in because the teacher can then see the progress of the student and the student doesn't lose their work, but they don't necessarily have to. And there's some free content here for K-2. And so all of these have voiceover. The idea, again, is that kids go in and they can use that voiceover to build with those blocks. And voiceover as a whole is something that we are consistently adding more of. So you definitely be on the lookout for that. And then the other piece I just remembered that I forgot is when you look at something like Tynker Smart Pass, if we come back, I know Georgia's, my kids go to school in Cobb County. We have no idea where Cobb County is going to be in the fall as far as remote learning. I mean, I personally hope that my second grader can go back because I think kids that young need more consistent teacher attention than my middle school daughters. But if you have to do some remote learning on the Smart Pass, we're working on a way where you can actually email that out to parents. So definitely keep that in mind. But let's take another few minutes so you can use Tynker Hour and kind of go where you want to go. So when you look at it from a perspective of you can do junior, you look at Space Cadet and Dragon spells. There's Tynker Hour of Code. There's Programming 100. You can go and start to look at how to build a class. Go where you want to go for up until kind of the top of the hour. And then we'll kind of come back. We'll wrap up a little bit and then definitely take some questions on camera as we go from there. So definitely take the next 5 minutes to kind of go where you want to go, see what you want to see. And really, if there's any questions on any level about Tynker, definitely let me know, because I know a lot of you too, probably just like Linda, are not only teaching K-2, you're also teaching 3 through 5. But we do have a 3 through 5 session that's in that 1 o'clock slot where we'll talk a little bit more about kind of concept for that level. But definitely you can ask those questions here as well. So let me... Let's go here. Let's go here. No, that's not what I want. All right, let's kind of come back just a little bit. All right, let's come back just a little bit. So what I want to do is I actually want to touch on some ways to get some support and some ways to kind of stay connected. And then Yolanda, we'll be ready to kind of take questions on video and any of that kind of stuff as we go after that. So let me share my screen real quick. And I realize oh, that's not the right screen I want to share. I got too many screens. That's the problem here at my house. Too many screens. All right, so we should be seeing my screen, I hope. If not, somebody tell me. But when you want to get connected, kind of stay connected on our front, is that we have a community, and when we look at the Twitter community, we use the hashtag everystudentcancode and everyteachercancode. And really the key here, and I want to kind of make this point, is that that's really what I think coding needs to be, is that every student needs an opportunity to code. Because when you look at it, I've heard, and it really kind of made me think, is there's a guy by the name of Jamie Cassup, who is actually the education evangelist for Google. And I saw him speak at a conference once, and what he said is, he said, you know, not everybody's going to have to be a computer programmer. That's not where the world's going. But every job is going to really have an effective, if they understand code, it's going to make them more effective. So when you look at it from a standpoint, and he kind of made the comparison when you look at it from Google, not everybody at Google is a programmer. I mean, you have people who sell things like YouTube ads. But if you understand code as that kind of salesman for YouTube ads, you're going to be much better at your job. And then the other part of that is that, and you've probably seen this a bunch at this conference, that coding as a whole teaches great life skills, things like problem solving and analytical skills. And again, it's all about the creation. Can we let kids create and learn that future ready skill at the same time? And then the other part here is we believe every teacher can code, because when you look at it from a standpoint of teachers teaching this, we try to make this as easy as possible on the teacher with lesson plans and classroom management that they're familiar with. And so that's kind of why those things really stand out to us. There's also a Tynker teacher community, and that community on Facebook has actually grown quite a bit over the COVID-19, the coronacation that we've all been under. So definitely, if you want to join that, definitely take a look at that. I'll leave those up for a second. And Yolanda, I can send this to you as well, but I sent this slide deck to Terry, who did my first session. And so this slide deck will definitely be on the app, but I can also send it to you if I need to. So we'll give that a sec. And then we will talk about, so I'll give it one more sec. I'll give it 10 seconds. And then talk about kind of how to get more here. How to, can you go out and get more as you kind of go through and as you play more. And so the support wise, there's a couple of support emails. I answer most of those. And here's the key too, is that most of you guys are in the Atlanta area or in Georgia, although there's some that not. Hello, my friend Keith George, if you're still in this session. And I know David Lockhart, who's a friend of mine as well, has been in the conference too. But if you're especially if you're in the Atlanta area, I can always come visit. I visit Linda if you want to kind of dive deeper into Tynker when we're back from not crazy Corona time. We can definitely set that up. But there's emails here. I answer most of those emails anyway, so you can definitely know that it's coming from me. And then the training.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I just wanted to say, if you want to reach out to another teacher too, I'm always looking for teachers to collaborate, do projects together, and share the project with kids from other schools. So feel free to reach out to me as a resource for collaboration.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then the other part is training wise, we're going to have a whole certification series that's not just on Tynker, but it's how to use block coding, how to do things like pedagogy in CS Classroom. So definitely take a look at that as well. Now I will end this deck, and Yolanda, I'll come back over here and I will quit sharing my screen here. We are ready to take questions. If you have any questions on the video, if you want to put yourself on video, we're ready. And April, I did say Jamie Cassup. I saw him speak at the Alabama conference. What? He's an interesting dude. No questions. We did it so well, Miss Kurtz, that everybody's like, let's just go and play. Well, good. And we're definitely available. I'm definitely available if there's any questions, if you think of something afterwards as well. You can chat me in the conference. I'm still on. I'm still on till 4 o'clock today.
I have a question.
I have no. I'm
What's the collection? What's the collection in the back? What kind of drink?
Oh, so like I said, I'm from Atlanta. Those are commemorative Coke bottles. I collected them as a kid, and then my mom downsized houses, and she's like, "Come get all your stuff." And I downsized the collection greatly, but I have this like office / man cave that's like my room in the house that they work perfectly in.
Cool beans. Well, you guys did do an excellent job. I've already sent this out to my brother. My nieces are 3 and 5, and I'm like, okay, got something new for you. So,
well, great. That's what I like to hear.
And I see Taylor has said the same thing. So,
awesome.
This is really useful. All right, last call for questions, comments.
1 month old may be a little young, but I will tell you my 2-year-old did well on it, April. All right.
Well, thank you guys so very much.
Awesome.
This was awesome. And David, I'll see you again this afternoon for another session. Linda, very nice to see you again this morning.
It's nice to see you too. Thanks.
All right. So with that, we have concluded this session.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.